Good morning, students. I hope you can see my this PPT. So today we will see tsunami. So in last class we have seen how this landslide hazard is happening in India. So today we will see another hazard called tsunami. So tsunami, you all know, it's a series of giant sea waves produced by a submarine earthquake or submarine landslide or submarine volcanic eruption. And the main characteristics of tsunami is that its long wavelength and great speed. And we all of us know in India, if you see, we are having nearly 7,516 kilometers. And among that 7,516 kilometers coastline, almost 5,700 kilometer coastline is prone to cyclones and tsunamis. So I'll show. Okay. Okay, so this is a photo taken from National Geographic News. So this is an image of tsunami happened in Natori, it is in Japan. So you can see how powerful the waves are. So now we will see some basic facts about tsunami. So today, if possible, we will see tsunami and we will see tsunami and flooding also. Okay, now we will see some basic facts about tsunami. So tsunami is actually a Japanese word. It used to pronounce as tsunami. Tsunami. Okay. So audio is not clear. Okay, 1 minute. Is it okay now? Is it okay? Okay. Okay, so tsunami is a Japanese word. So the tsunami is very common in Japan. See, tsunami, normally we used to think tsunami is a single wave. Actually, it's not that way. So, this is a tsunami used to come as a series of giant sea waves. So, tsunamis are sometimes called tidal waves, but actually, that is a wrong term because tsunami is not related to tides. So, tsunamis, we can call it as harbor wave or seismic sea wave. So, both the terms are correct, but don't call it as tidal wave because it is not having it means it have no connection with tides. So tsunamis can also call harbor waves or seismic sea wave because this tsunamis are normally formed due to some submarine earthquakes. That's why we are calling it as seismic sea wave. And since we are calling harbor wave, it's because it always have a tendency to approach to the harbor or coastal line. So that's why we are calling it as harbor wave or seismic sea wave. And tsunami, as I said, tsunamis are usually formed due to earthquakes, which is having a magnitude of 8 or more than 8. Okay, so in open sea, if you see the tsunamis, sometimes it can travel without notice because sometimes it can travel unnoticed. Because at the open sea or deep sea, it used to have a speed of 8,000 kilometer per hour, but normally the wave height is small. Okay, so sometimes it can pass unnoticed in deep sea. Okay, so most of the time in open sea it is having a wave height of less than 30 centimeter. So that means very small. But the powerful shockwave energy, which can actually travels very rapidly. So as I said, this tsunami waves normally travels with the speed of 800 kilometer per hour in deep sea. So that means it moves at a very faster rate, like a jet and all. So 800 kilometer per hour means it used to be having a speed of jet. Okay. So, but once the tsunami reaches the shallow surface, shallow water near the shoreline, then it will become slowly, the speed will become slow down. Okay. So near coastline, it used to move at a speed of say roughly 45 kilometer per hour. Okay, because then the top of the wave moves faster than the bottom part because when it comes to the coastal line of the towards the land area, so the sea bottom will try to drag the wave. So as a result, what will happen? The water column will ski upwards and increasing in height. So this in this distance in coastal area, so the wave height will be maximum 50 means it can have wave height of 15 to 30 meter instead of 30 centimeter in the deep sea. Okay. Okay. So next, now, okay, that is about some basic facts. So tsunami is a Japanese word. So su means harbor, nami means wave. So it's also called seismic sea waves or harbor waves. And it is not having, it doesn't have any connection with tides. So we cannot call it as tidal waves because normally people used to call it as tidal waves. But it is not at all related to tides. Okay. And this usually it formed due to some great earthquakes which is having magnitude of 8 or more. And it can also happen due to some submarine landslide or submarine volcanic activities also. And at deeper sea, deep sea or open ocean, it used to be having a speed of nearly 700 to 800 kilometer per hour. But when it reaches to the coastline, the speed gradually decreases because when it comes near the shoreline, the bottom part, the sea bottom, that will drag the wave towards the bottom. As a result, the tsunami wave will speed up, okay, and it will increase in height. So nearly it can reach up to 30 to some 15 to 30 meter height near the coastal area. Okay, so that is those are the basic facts about tsunami. Now we will see how this tsunami forms. What is the real mechanism behind the generation of tsunami waves? So in most of the case, as I said, tsunamis are formed due to some submarine earthquake which is having higher magnitude. So this is a schematic diagram which explains the mechanism of tsunami generation. So here you can see this one. This number one indicates this is the place where tsunami originates. So here, when there is a submarine earthquake occurs beneath the sea, some part of the sea floor. So this part is called, this orange part is called sea floor. So the sea floor will either it will move up or it will move down, because we have seen in faulting it can be reverse faulting or normal faulting. So in both the way the tsunami waves can form. So here initially there will be some faulting happens. So as a result, sea floor will either move up or down. Okay, so as a result, what will happen? The water column which is surrounding this area, so that will also displace in response to rock movement. So it will means it will form a wave in response to the movement. Okay, so seafloor movement. According to the seafloor movement, some part of the water column will displace. Okay, so then this wave will. Okay, so that's a small tidal wave, not tidal. Tsunami wave will form, and this wave will move out in all directions. So it can means it can travel in all directions, that wave. Okay, so at this stage it will be having a speed of nearly 800 kilometer per hour, and the wave height will be usually 30 centimeter to 2 meter. Okay, so as the tsunami waves approaches the shallow water, so it will move in all directions. So we are seeing this particular direction. So that means you can see it was a small wave. So when it comes to the coastal area, then the sea floor will start dragging towards the bottom part. This wave. Okay, so as a result, what will happen? This due to this dragging of seafloor against the bottom, the large amount of water have to accumulate. Okay, so as a result, the wave height will start increasing. So towards the coastal area, you can see the wave height will increasing. Okay, and it can reach up to 15 to 30 meter. Okay, so okay, so this much water means this much tall water column is sufficient to flood the entire land within 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so this is how a tsunami works. So here initially one earthquake will happen. So as a result, the water will displace and it will form a wave. So this wave will propagate in all directions, and as it moves towards the coastal line, when it reaches near the coastal line, it will start, the tsunami waves will start dragging towards the sea bottom. Okay, so as a result, this whole water column will they will form a tall water column due to squeezing up. Okay, and the wave height will increase and it will reach up to 15 to 30 meter. So that much water column is sufficient for flooding the entire coastal area. So this is how a tsunami works. So now we will see how the tsunami will form. So there are four different mechanisms. So one is this is the actual mechanism. So here there are four different reasons for tsunami generation. So in most of the cases, in 90% of the cases, this is due to some submarine earthquake, and it also can happen due to some submarine volcanic eruption, and sometimes it can due to some submarine landslide, and also it can be due to some submarine asteroid impact also. So I'm not quoting examples for this different types, so you can read from the reference material which I have shared. So now we will see how vulnerable our India to tsunami hazards. So mainly, if you see the Indian scenario, there are two potential sources which are responsible for tsunamis in India. So the east and west coast of India and the island region, the Andaman Nicobar island region, those are likely to be mostly affected by tsunamis generated by this subduction storm related earthquake. So in India, there are near to Indian coastal area, there are two potential sources for tsunami generation. So one is Andaman Nicobar Sumatra Island Arc, and second one is Makrana subduction zone, which is in the north of Arabian Sea. So these are the two potential sources for tsunami generation. And okay, in coming slide, I will show you. So there is one organization called INCOIS, so Indian National Center for Oceanic Information System. So this is a research center in Hyderabad, and it is under Ministry of Earth Sciences. So this organization, they have specially established for tsunami warning. So as per their studies, so for a tsunami generation, it is not necessary that all the major earthquake which is cause tsunami always. It is not necessary. So sometimes it cannot form tsunami also. So as per the INCOI study, so if for a tsunami to occur in India, it is necessary to happen an earthquake with a magnitude more than 7. It should be okay. If there is a submarine earthquake which is happening with magnitude less than 7, it is not necessary that to form a tsunami. So that is one case, and even though if there are some submarine earthquake which is happening with a magnitude more than 7, it is not necessary that it should always result in a tsunami situation. Also, there is another factor which is depending on the distance from the earthquake location, then we can predict how much time the tsunami will take to reach coastal area. So here I have given one table here. So this is the travel time of tsunami waves to a few Indian coastal locations for four historic earthquake events. So this is the earthquake which is happened in northern Sumatra during December 2004. This is earthquake happened in Java in 1977. And this is from data from Andaman earthquake which happened in June 1941. And this is the earthquake location which earthquake happened in Makran area during 1945. So here you can see these are some coastal locations in India. So Indira Point, Port Blair, Chennai, Visakhapatnam, Kochi, Gujarat, Mumbai. So this is the time taken to reach the tsunami waves to that particular location. So when this 2004 earthquake happened in northern Sumatra, it took only 20 minutes to reach the Indira Point and 90 minutes to reach Port Blair, 170 minutes to reach Chennai, 180 minutes for Visakhapatnam, 250 minutes to reach Kochi, 430 minutes to reach Gujarat, and 440 minutes to reach Mumbai. Okay, so this is another parameter. So based on the intensity of the earthquake, magnitude of earthquake as well as the distance from the earthquake location. So these are the two parameters which determines the effect of tsunami. Okay, so this is about tsunami vulnerability in India. So now we will see what are the effects of tsunami. So there are two different types of effects. One is primary effects. So those are the immediate effect, most immediate effect. So if there is a tsunami, then the immediate or primary effect is one is encroachment of seawater to the low-lying area. So encroachment means it is flooding the whole low-lying area near the coastal part that will undergo flooding. So and also some erosion also will happen. So it will cover up whatever things coming on its path, including vegetation, buildings, humans, whatever. So that is the most immediate effect of a tsunami. And secondary effects means, as we see in earthquake effect, it can destroy gas line, water lines, etc. So it will cause some fires. Then some also it can contaminate the drinking water facility. Also, it can sometimes it can result in outbreaking of some waterborne diseases like especially like malaria and cholera. So these are the secondary effects. So it may happen after some time of tsunami. So primary effect is flooding. So that is very immediate and very prominent effect of tsunami. In secondary effect, one is it can destroy the gas line, water lines, etc. And also it can cause some outbreaking of waterborne diseases like malaria and cholera. So these are the effects of tsunami. So now I will tell you one story. So this is here you can see this actually is a beach. So beach means little inward, little towards the open sea. So here you can see in this figure you can see so much of the sea floor is visible to us. Okay, so this is actually one of the nature's warning sign of an approaching tsunami because just before the tsunami, so there will be a sudden withdrawal of sea from the coastal region. So we will be able to see the deeper sea floor. So most of the cases, people will be very curious and they will rush to see what is exposed means what is that means sometimes we can see some exposed reefs, sometimes we can see lots of fishes and shells. So people will be very curious and they will start running towards the seafloor, exposed to seafloor area. And what happens when the tsunami comes, because it comes very quickly. it happened just before a tsunami. So ultimately, the people whoever is standing over this area, so they will be swept away within a fraction of a second. Okay. So I'll tell you one incident. So it happened in December 2004 tsunami time. So there was a 10-year-old British girl. So she came to Phuket Island. It's a famous tourist place in Thailand. She came for a vacation with the family. So this small girl suddenly she was standing on the resort area. So suddenly she saw the ocean water is quickly receding, that is going back towards the ocean from the beach. Okay, so this girl actually she saw this and she immediately told her mother that it is a warning sign before a tsunami. So then they immediately, her mother along with some resort staff, they have warned all the people who are standing and watching this, and they asked them to clear the beach area. So thus the small kid saved many people's life during December 2004 tsunami. So this actually she has learned in school just 2 weeks back. So this is the way you should also be aware about this type of natural hazards and some safety measures. So you should understand. So that is why that is what we are meaning from this disaster management course. So this is actually one main aim of this course. So you should understand about this kind of safety measures and warning signs. Okay, so in case in your future, if you are meeting with such kind of incident, then the best thing is you should evacuate once. You should run away from that area. Okay, so that is one thing. So now we will see how the tsunami warning system works. Okay, so a tsunami warning system has mainly three components. One is a network of seismograms, which actually helps to determine the accurate location, depth, and magnitude of the submarine earthquake. Then the second component is an automated tidal gauges. This actually measures the unusual rise and fall of sea level. And third component is a network of sensors which is connected to floating buoys. So buoy means on this right side you can see, and down right side you can see this is a buoy. Okay, so these two people are standing on a buoy. So this is a floating kind of platform. So this buoy, so in down side, left hand side, you can see this buoy is actually connected with some sensors, and these sensors are able to detect even small changes in pressure. Okay, so when the tsunami occurs, so they will exert some huge pressure. Okay, so this sensor, what actually does means this will detect this kind of huge pressure changes, and this will send signals to the buoy, floating buoy, and from this buoy it will send towards the this satellite. Okay, so from satellite this signal will send to all the different warning centers. So this is how a tsunami warning system works. So actually after 1946 tsunami in Hawaii area, it's in United States. So after this 1946 tsunami, the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey they have actually first established the tsunami early warning system in Pacific coastal region. So it was in Hawaii. So there was mainly a pressure sensor on the ocean floor which detects a change in wave height by measuring the excess pressure. So these pressure sensors transmit a signal to the floating buoy, as we can see in the picture. So this used to float at the surface. So these sensors will send a signal to the floating buoy, and from the floating buoy it will goes to the different warning centers via satellite. So this is how a tsunami warning system works. So after 2004 tsunami, so the Ministry of Earth Science, they have established a research center called INCOIS. So I'll show you. So this is the research organization called INCOIS. The full form is Indian National Center for Oceanic Information System. So this is in Hyderabad, and this is exclusively for oceanic studies. So they have made the tsunami early warning system operational from 15th October 2007. So this is sender which actually gives information about origin, location, and how much magnitude and depth of earthquake. Okay, which is happening inside the Indian Ocean. So within 20 minutes of the first earthquake incidents, they will pass the information to different agencies in an automated mode. So this is how our this tsunami warning system works. Okay. So now we will move on to some survival techniques. If suppose if a tsunami happens, what we have to do? So always a big earthquake, which is normally the big earthquakes or high magnitude earthquake causes the tsunami. So if you are suppose if you are standing in a beach, then most of the cases you may feel a severe ground shaking. So that is an important warning sign. So if it is happens when you are in a, suppose if you are in a beach area, then the thing which you can do is immediately leave the beach and move to some safe place like some higher elevation. Okay, so then second thing is you can see some rapid receding as you seen in the picture. So there will be some rapid receding of water and it will expose coral reefs, then rocks, fishes on the sea bottom. So sometimes you can see the tsunami often comes as a wall of water. So with the wave height will be more than the usual wave height. So in that case also, if you try to look closer, then within a fraction of a second, you will be swept away. So if suppose if you are seeing such warning sign, then the thing is you have to run out of the place. Okay, and also sometimes you can hear some loud roaring sound similar to some approaching train or jet. So that is also another warning sign. So don't return to, suppose if there is a tsunami occurred, then don't return to the shore just after the first wave because most of the time the first wave may not be that much dangerous. Okay, so the danger can last for some several hours after the arrival of first wave. So till you get the official announcement about the safety, don't go back to the beach and stay tuned for the news. Okay, this is what we can do when a tsunami occurs. Okay, so this is a small topic, so that's it. If you are having some doubt, then you can ask me. Otherwise, we'll move on to another topic called flooding. Today I'll send you these PPTs. Okay, one more thing I forgot to tell you. So by next week I'll conduct one exam. So that will be objective type. So the timing and date I'll inform you in your Google Classroom. So just keep looking in the Google Classroom. So I'll inform you. Okay. Now we will see flooding. So flooding means it is just an overflow of water, which usually it submerges the lands, which is usually dry. Okay, in other time the area will be dry, but during flood, the land which will submerge, which is normally in normal cases that area will be dry in nature. So flooding is an overflow of water. So floods are weather events where the water temporarily covers the land. So by definition, if you see, so floods are the events where water will temporarily covers the land, which normally doesn't cover. Okay, so flooding can happen anywhere, but the features like geography in the sense like low-lying areas can actually increase the risk for a specific type of flooding. So there are different types of flooding. You will see them in one by one. So if you see India, if you see India, India is one of the most affected country in the world. It's most flood-prone countries in the world. So the principal reason for flooding in India is one is its natural ecological systems in India, like its monsoon. Now, if you see the intensity as well as the means the timing. So there is a huge change in timing and intensity of the monsoon. So that is one of the reason. So then highly filtered river system. So that can also cause flooding. So there are different reasons. So then average rainfall in India is normally nearly 1,000 millimeter, and it used to vary across the country. There are significant variation across the country. So most of the flood, if you see, most of the flooding events which happen during monsoon period, and it is usually associated with some tropical storm or depression. And if you take 35 states and union territories, out of this, 23 states in our country which are prone to flooding. And as per the study, then this almost 14 million hectares of land. So this is a past study. So as per 1956 study, almost 40 million hectares of land is prone to flooding. So that will come around 1/8 of the total country's geographical area, which is very prone to flooding. And there is a national flood control program which has launched in country during 1954. So since the launching of that program, there is a considerable decrease in flood protection measures. We have taken enough protection measures. Okay. So, okay. So first, we will start with some positive impacts. So, flood obviously it is very destructive in nature, and it is one of the major disaster occur in India. So, apart from the negative effects, there can be some positive impacts also, because normally due to flooding, we can have some replenishment of groundwater, because it will means refill the groundwater level. So that is one positive thing. Also, it can return some nutrients to soils. So that is another positive impact of flooding. And the renewal of wetlands. In the CUTN campus, this is an example for a wetland kind of area. So this during this flooding event, we can have some renewal of this kind of wetlands, and also it used to prevent erosion and maintain landmass elevation. And also it can recover some natural fish stock. So these are some positive impacts of flooding. So now, okay, I will put it in full screen. Okay, so now we will see some images from past flooding events. So this is some pictures which I have taken from Uttarakhand flood happened in 2013. So on June 17, 2013, the heavy monsoon rain resulted in flash flooding in Uttarakhand state. So this rain happened actually 2 weeks before the normal predicted schedule. So Uttarakhand, the state is located in foothills of Himalaya. So it is very prone to flooding, the Uttarakhand state. And you must be known about the famous temple in Kedarnath, which is located in Rudraprayag district of Uttarakhand. So I have been to this place in 2010 during our field work. So I still remember this huge statue, the Lord Shiva statue. It was in the Rishikesh town. So this is a photo of Kedarnath after torrential rain, which almost completely destroyed the township. So only the temple, which itself got saved due to its stone structure. So these are some pictures of that Kedarnath area. So you can see how disaster the flooding event was. So this is the Kedarnath temple. So this is the backside of the temple. So this actually saved from the flooding because it is fully made up of stone structure. Okay, so yeah, this is the temple. So now I will show you some other pictures. This is from September 4, 2019, Mumbai flood. So this is the LBS road in Kurla. So here the train services got affected and the streets were waterlogged. So this was a very heavy rainfall. And so this is another picture from Adaya River this is the Saidapet bridge. So this is happened in 2015 December in Chennai. So this is another photo. This is from Kasirangan National Park during flooding. So Kasirangan National Park is one of the main attraction in Assam state. So see this flooding in Brahmaputra River. So this happened in every year. So the state of Assam, which is very flood prone state. So here in picture you can see some one-horned rhinos, which is actually they are moving in flooded national park. So if you see search in internet, you can see many such kind of images, which is very sad to see. So this is another picture. This is from Madhurpur district of Bihar. Bihar is also another very flood-prone state in India. So some cattle which are stranded on small islands surrounded by flood water. So this is from Madhapur district in Bihar state. So this flooding happened in 2008, September 7, 2008. So these are some images. So now we will see what are the different types of flood. So there are different types of flood. So we will see them in one by one. So first one is flash flood. So flash flood means it is those are very dangerous in nature because it occur within 6 hours time duration. Okay, and these are very fast moving water. So this can sweep means all the things which are coming on its path. So it is usually caused by heavy rain and sudden rainfall. So also it can due to some rapid snow thaw. Snow thaw means melting of ice. So when this snow melts very rapidly, so in that case also we can expect flash flooding. And another reason is dam failure. So in these three cases, we can expect flash flood. Its main characteristics is it is very dangerous because within 6 hours time, that is a normal time period for a flash flood. So within 6 hours time, the flooding will happen. Okay, and flash flood normally happens when the ground cannot absorb the water as quickly as it falls. Okay, whenever it is falling, if it is absorbing, then there is no point of flooding. So if the ground is failed to absorb excess water which is coming from the heavy rainfall, so in that case, flash flood usually happens. And this type of flood usually subsides very quickly. Water goes down. Okay, but while it lasts for some means sometimes it can last fast moving, sometimes it can be fast moving and very dangerous. And this type of flood occur with little notice. Okay, little or no notice. That means we won't get enough time to evacuate from that place. Okay, that's why this flooding is very dangerous in nature. And actually, this flash flooding we can prevent by making some good drainage system. If there is a very good drainage system, then whatever excess water will fall, so that will move away. Okay, so the rapid water can move large objects like cars, rocks, and trees. Okay, so these are very dangerous. And this area covered by water in a flash flood is relatively small compared to other types of flooding, but it is concentrated in a small area and it can rise very higher level. So those are the characteristics of flash flood. As I said, it usually happens because of heavy rainfall, and it can travel with the speed of it can travel at a greater speed. So for that reason, this type of flooding is very dangerous in nature. So this is about flash flooding, and next category is coastal flood. Okay, okay, better I will show you some block diagram. So here you can see these are called flash flooding. So this is normally due to intense rainfall, intense and rapid rainfall. So sometimes it can be formed due to some dam failure. Also, it can happen due to some rapid snow melting. So by these three reasons, we can have flash flooding, and this moves at a very high speed, and the water column height will also be very large. It's high in nature. Okay, and it usually concentrated in very small area, but still due to extreme speed and higher water column, this makes it makes a very dangerous situation. Okay. Now, second category is coastal flooding. So, coastal flooding, the term coastal flooding means when the coast is flooded by sea. So, that is meant by coastal flooding. Also, it called tidal flood. So this is normally caused by some strong winds or storms that moves towards the coastal side during high tide. Okay, so this is called coastal flooding. So normally this is the height level of normal high tide. Okay, so when there is a during a high tide time, so if there is a strong wind or storm, then it can go beyond the normal high tide level. Okay, then it will cause coastal flooding. Okay, so low-lying seasides are usually have some defense system against this kind of coastal flooding. So sometimes it used to be man-made, and sometimes it used to be some natural barriers like sand dunes or something. Okay, so usually these coastal areas with few defense systems and lower elevations are getting more affected by coastal flooding. And we all know that as global warming is increasing, the coastal flooding is expected to be recurring, as well as the severity of this coastal flooding will increase in future. Okay, so this is about coastal flooding. So coastal flooding happens due to strong winds or storms that moves towards the coastal area during a high tide. So those are called coastal flooding or tidal flooding. And this usually affect the low-lying areas, which is near the coastal part. So those are getting most affected by coastal flooding. So now we will see the third one, river flooding or fluvial flood. So this is one of the very common type of flooding happened in India. So it can last for days or weeks. Okay. So these are characterized by some gradual river overflow caused by some extensive rainfall over an extended period of time. Okay, so if there is an extensive or intense rainfall which is lasts for a longer period of time, then we can expect a riverine flood or fluvial flood. The areas covered by river flood depend on the size of the river. If the river is bigger, then it will affect more area. Okay. Also, the intensity of rainfall also is affect how much area is getting affected. Okay. So okay, I will show you. So there are some terms related to 1 minute. Okay. Okay. Actually, this got covered. Okay, so there are some terms before this riverine flooding. Okay, I'll explain you. So this is about river flooding. So river channel. Okay, so I'll show you. So here there are some important terms I'll tell you. So here you can see a river channel. So this is called river channel. So river channel means it is a pathway along which the water flow means the river water flows. So here at the center of the river channel, there you can see along the sides of this river channel you can see some flat area. Okay, so flat area which is towards the land area. Okay, so on both side of the river you can see some flat area. Okay, so this flat area is called floodplains. Okay, these are called floodplains. So this area is this part of land area is very prone to flooding because if there is an excess water level, then this area will going to affect in first. Okay, so other than this floodplain, there are another term called levee. Okay, so levee, you can see the lighter shade area. This is called levee. So levee means actually the bank of sediment which is deposited at the edge of the river channel, and which usually higher or little more elevated than the level of floodplain. So floodplain, this darker shade is indicate floodplain. So towards the towards both side of the river channel, you can see some little elevated area. So this is called natural levee or natural levee. So if it is formed, it can form either man-made or natural. So if it is forming naturally, then we will call it as natural levee. Okay, so it normally acts as a barrier, so which blocks the water from river channel to flow towards the floodplain. So in normal condition, the water, if the water level is little higher, then this will act as a barrier so that the water, excess water will not go to the floodplain. So this is a term called levee or natural levee. So this natural levees which are formed by natural movement of water. Okay, so this will always pushes so the water has a tendency to push its sediments towards the sides of the channel. Okay, so during the flooding, what will happen? The water level increase, and it will during flooding time, the river water have a more power to bring more sediments towards the floodplain area. So with multiple episodes of flooding, what will happen? There will be forming enough thickness of floodplain and natural levee along the sides of the river channel. Okay. So during flooding, thickest and coarsest means large sized particles will get deposited towards the channel edges, and thus the natural levee will form. Okay, and always the finer sediment will move further away. So if you see here, if you see laterally, then the coarser sediment will get deposited towards the levee side, and the finer sediments will go towards the floodplain side. Okay, so this way a natural barrier system will form next to the river channel, and these are called natural levees. So after many flooding, what will happen? The accumulation, the sediment will keep accumulating and it will form some small ridge-like structure parallel to the river channel. So this way, the floodplain and natural levee will form. So, okay, now we will. So this is about riverine flood. So now we will see this pluvial flooding or surface flooding. So pluvial. Okay, before that we will see urban flood. I don't have the picture for urban flooding. So urban flooding is normally very common in urban areas. That's why the name urban flooding. And this is mainly due to the lack of drainage system in urban areas. Because in urban areas we are having little exposed soil to absorb the water. And due to land development, we normally replace the permeable soil particles with we used to replace it with impermeable. So permeable means which are allowing the liquids to pass through it. That is called permeable. So we are actually replacing the permeable soil layer by impermeable pavement structure or some concretes or roads. Okay. So as a result, what will happen? The water cannot infiltrate. So it will ultimately result in flooding called urban flooding. So this is the urban flooding. So pluvial flooding is also similar to urban flooding only. So pluvial flooding actually happens in rural area. Okay. So pluvial flooding is a type of urban flooding which happens in rural India. Because this pluvial flooding forms some flat areas where terrains cannot absorb the rainwater. And this will result in formation of puddles or ponds, like small water clogging. Okay, so pluvial flooding is similar to urban flooding. The only difference is pluvial flooding occurs mostly in rural area. And this type of flood can seriously affect because the agricultural activities that may get affected. Also, in this type of flooding, the water level will increase gradually, and the people will get enough time to go out of the place. Therefore, it is not causing any immediate threat to people's life, but still it can damage agriculture very badly. Okay, so that is called surface flooding. Okay, now the next one is groundwater flooding. So this groundwater flooding is normally caused due to some prolonged periods of rainfall or some extremely heavy rain. In both the cases, we can have groundwater flooding. So in this type of flooding, the underground water level will rise above the normal level and it will reach the surface. So during prolonged rainfall or extremely heavy rainfall, the ground becomes so waterlogged. It will be saturated with water. So it cannot drain away the excess water naturally. So what will happen? This is very common in places which having permeable rocks. So this permeable rocks means which can allow the water to pass through it. So this type of flood can last for some weeks or sometimes it can last for some months. Okay. So this type of flooding is very risk for tunnels and cut. So in this picture you can see this is very critical for some tunnels and cutaway roads. Means you can see from this figure. So this is about groundwater flooding. So this is due to prolonged periods of rainfall or extremely heavy rainfall. And this type of flooding when this underground water level will get rise than the normal level and it will reach the surface. Okay, so this is mainly due to the saturated nature of sediments or the basement during the heavy rain. Okay, so now next one is sewage flooding. So for that also I don't have any picture, but this is one of the most means worst type of flooding to see because it can contain sewage wastes which can cause both environmental and health related issues. And this can happen in two different cases. One is sometimes it is due to some failure of sewage system. So if it breaks in some way, then we can have sewage flood. And the second thing is if suppose if the amount of water from other type of flooding, like urban flooding or some other flooding. So due to other flooding type, if the water is coming too much, which the sewer system cannot hold, or what will happen? The sewer system will overflow. So in both the cases, we can expect sewage flood. One is breaking of sewage system. Other one, if there is an excess water discharge from other flooding to the sewage system, then also we can have sewage flooding. So it is simply the overflow of water from the drainage and sewage system. So as I said, it is very hazardous because it contains both bacteria and contaminant kind of material. Okay. So now we will see what are the different causative factors of flooding. So there are both natural and anthropogenic factors for flooding. So natural Okay, so natural positive factors which include rainfall, melting of ice or snow, then collapsing of dam or reservoir, then storm surge or tsunami. So these are the natural causes. So we will see them in one by one. So rainfall means this rainfall it can be means it can act two ways. So one is prolonged rainfall. So if the rain falls for a large time period, then the soil becomes saturated with water and the excess of water will fail to infiltrate into the soil, so which is already saturated with water. So in that case, water will force to flow over the sediment and it will form flooding. So this is one way rainfall can affect. And second is if the rainfall intensity is very high or if there is a heavy rainfall. So in that case, what happens? The rain droplets will be very bigger in size. Okay, so when these raindrops hit the ground surface, it will be hitting with a force, and this will cause the raindrops to become means bounce off. Okay, so as a result, what will happen? The soil will, instead of infiltrating into the soil, it will bounce off the surface, and as a result, the water from the rain is forced to flow over the surface. So in that case also, the runoff rate will be more in both the cases. So in heavier, if the rainfall is lasting for a longer time, then the whole surface will become saturated with water, and after some time it cannot absorb more water because it's already saturated with water. So the excess water will move as surface runoff. And if there is a intense, this is about prolonged rainfall. If the rainfall rate is high, if the rainfall is heavy in nature, so in that case, the bigger droplets will hit the ground with a force, and because of this reason, they will bounce off from the surface. So as a result, that case also we can have excess runoff. Okay, so in both the cases, we can expect flooding. So next is melting of ice or snow. So as temperature increases, the snow and ice will start melting. So when there is a large amount of snow or ice melting very quickly, so it often lead to flooding. Okay, so next is collapsing of dams. Okay, so when the heavy rain comes, the water level in dams will naturally increase. So if the infrastructure of dams are very old in nature, then it will means there are more chances of having a failure of this kind of dams, and this will lead to large outpouring of water, and thus flooding situation become even critical for people who are living around the dam site. So this is another reason for flooding, collapsing of dam. And fourth one is storm surge or tsunami. So as we discussed in coastal flooding, the storm surges from hurricanes and other tropical system can cause abnormal sea level rise, and it will lead to flooding in coastal areas. Similarly, tsunamis also can cause flooding in low-lying coastal areas. Then, if you see the anthropogenic or human-induced causes, the one of the main causes is increased urbanization. So, as part of development in urban areas, we are modifying the land area. So, in most of the cases, we are replacing permeable soil with that of impervious level, like layers like some pavement structure. Or sometimes we used to apply concrete and this road we are making. So, in all these cases, what is happening? The water cannot infiltrate. As a result, the increased water level will happen, and it will cause a surface runoff. So surface runoff means water will flowing above the surface, which will lead to urban flooding and flash flooding. And next is unscientific agricultural practices. So in agricultural practices, like excess cutting and burning of agriculture, then over cultivation, over grazing like practices, this all will cause soil to become very infertile, and as a result, the soil become very and means soil become unable to sustain the vegetation. So if the vegetation is decreasing, then it cannot absorb the water. As a result, there will be large rate of surface runoff and it will cause flooding. And next is the deforestation. So you all know trees prevent soil erosion, and the trees will also help to increase the water infiltration. So cutting down of trees in a reckless manner, which can also lead to flooding. And last is improper waste disposal. This is, if you look around, you can see most of the time the garbages are not properly disposed. These garbages can enter into some drainage system and it can clog the drain. So this happens with natural water bodies also. This large amount of garbages will block and obstruct the free flow of water. So during heavy rainfall, the excess water cannot go to the main water bodies, and it will cause. It can also lead to flooding. So if you see any other resources, you can see different factors due to time constraint. I'm not means I have actually made it short. So there can be other reasons also for flooding. So these are the main reasons for flooding. Okay, so now okay. Now, if you see, this is the flood hazard map of India. So here, this India, whole India has divided into different zones. So if you see the global scale, 32% of the national calamities are due to flooding, and India, almost 40 million hectares of land which is prone to flooding. And nowadays, the flood has become very common natural disaster in India. And the main reason is change in nature and extent of Indian monsoon, plus rate of urbanization also. These are the two factors which plays a pivotal role in flooding. The effect of flooding is more pronounced in mainly rural areas. Most of the time, this flood results in outbreaking of seas, out epidemics like malaria and cholera. So this flooding can cause some contamination of drinking water. As a result, it can lead to some water scarcity also. And also it has a very drastic effect on agricultural sector also, because sometimes this flood water remains standing over a long period of time, like some weeks it can stand in the same way. So it will actually hamper the growth of crops. So if you see in India, most of the flood happens during monsoon period, and as I said, 23 states are very prone to flooding. And okay, so the most vulnerable states of in India are mainly Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Assam, West Bengal, Gujarat, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Punjab, and Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the more prone areas which more prone to flooding in India. So the heavy rainfall in Himalayas during southwest monsoon causes severe flooding in rivers of Uttar Pradesh, UP, means UP, Bihar, West Bengal, and Assam. And if you take the case of southern states, the flooding is mainly due to heavy rains by depression in Bay of Bengal during southwest monsoon season. So, if you see the severity of flooding, so that is contributed by different factors like total amount of water in flood, that is how much flood volume. So that is one parameter, and how fast the flood is moving. So if the flood is moving, means how fast the flood rising. Okay. So if the flood is rising very quickly, then definitely we will get less time to get for warning and evacuation. So that is another parameter which decides the severity of flooding. And next is how fast the water is moving. That is the flow velocity. So if the flow is moving very faster, then higher will be the risk. Okay, and duration of flooding. So if it is lasting for a longer time, then the impact also will be more. And the fifth factor is aerial extent of flooding. So if it is affecting large area, then larger will be the impacts also. So now we will, okay, so these are the red areas are the most flood prone areas. So now we will see mitigation. So flood mitigation measures we can classify into two groups. One is structural measures and the second one is non-structural measures. So that we will see in next class. Okay. So I'll take attendance and I'll leave you. Alan Prince.
Present, ma'am.
Amrita.
Present, ma'am.
Anil Dev.
Present, ma'am.
Absent. Bindya.